Hey everybody, welcome to this chat. Christie, I'm just going to get her on here. We've come on 5 minutes early to get this tech going. Aha, Christie. Christie, we've done it. Oh my God.
We did it.
I just need a minute because the lead up to that tech drama, it's like not being able to practice it and then just hoping for the best. It's got to be a better way. I'm sure there's a better way to do it, but it's
you know what? I think the better way is just doing it and doing it and doing it.
I think so, yeah. But that's the problem, is that you can't test it, because if I were to go in and test it, then everyone would go like, oh, they're live, and they come on. I don't know.
I know.
We've made it. I'm so surprised. That was actually really easy, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was for me. Not so much for you, though. You've done all the heavy lifting.
Did you have anxiety about that, like as much as I did?
Yes, I would say probably just about as much as you did. I was like, okay, I'm in the group now. It's 10:24, 10:25. Here we go.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's not just the 15-minute, 20-minute chat. It's the lead up, the anxiety, the building it, the making the tech. But now I can't tell you how much more relaxed I am now. It looks beautiful where you are.
Oh, thank you. It's just my garden.
Oh, yeah. Isn't it great to see the sunshine now?
I feel like we've worked for it. We've really, really earned it. And now I just love to sit with the doors open on mornings like this, because it's not too hot. It's just the perfect temperature where I can wear a jacket. I can have my sunglasses on if I need them, but I'm not blazing. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, and I always, I take the kids to school through London rush hour. Do you do London rush hour too?
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
You do, don't you?
Right in the middle of it.
I never thought that I'd
As
see
you
that.
can tell from my shirty text to my daughter that you get.
Yeah, Christy sent me a text yesterday that was a mistake. It was like, can you get the right train? I was like, oh,
you've already made us late enough. Get your tusha-woosh to the train right now.
Yeah,
that's kind of my life.
A lot of insights into what the teenage years are going to be like.
Oh,
just that one little text.
You know what?
I don't know.
They're definitely not for the faint of heart, but at the same time, you get this amazing relationship that's developing, because your little person that you've created now becomes their own person.
Yeah.
And it's really incredible to just see them, because as parents, it's very difficult not to see your children as an extension of yourself.
Yeah.
But they very quickly remind you that they are not, that they are their own people.
Exactly.
But that's amazing to watch that develop.
It's about like letting go, but then that balance is that you still need to advise them, so that's going to be difficult. And now, is this the daughter of yours that has been in The Witches?
Yes. Wow. She was in The Witches. She came off The Witches in January, and since then she was lucky enough to get an absolutely amazing agent as a result of the show, who has been working for her so hard. So she's done probably 10, maybe more self-tapes since The Witches closed. And she's made it quite far for a couple of big things, but she hasn't booked anything yet. But to be honest, she's the kind of kid where she's just like, she's equally as happy to be now doing cricket training and to be able to hang out with her friends and do more play dates. So yeah.
Kid. So, I mean, just firstly, hello, everyone who is already here with us. So I see some great Sing Space friends, Helen, Dolores, Janet, hello. It's so nice to see you. Christy and I are both thrilled. I think I speak for Christy about being back on here because, I love the Sing Space community. It gets really lonely being on, by yourself. And it's just such a great resource. But before we start talking to Christy, tell us a little bit actually about what we were just saying, Christy, about your daughter being on The Witches. And because I think this is a big thing for people, how did you get her into that? How did she get into that? Firstly,
well, the story of how my daughter got into The Witches is really a story about belting. It's a story about belting and starting early and letting it be natural. So we've never really imposed. My husband is also used to be an actor, and now he does sales, so he's not performing anymore. But we both have that kind of background and the hunger and the, you know, kind of the, you know, the love for it. But we've never really pushed that on our kids.
Right.
And but yet during the pandemic, as we know, all teaching went online. And I had 2 days of work at that time. My Wednesdays were belting and my Thursdays were legit. And so my kids couldn't not hear me teaching belting. And it was 6 hours of belting on Wednesdays and 6 hours of legit on Thursdays. Yeah. And all of a sudden, probably about 6 months after that happened, we started hearing these belty sounds coming out of my daughter's bedroom. We're like, what is she doing? And she was just making these really joyful belty sounds. And then she started listening to music and what came out of her was a belt, right? It was a joyful, happy call. Mm-hmm. And my husband and I were like, I don't know, is this good? And I'm like, I don't know, she's my daughter. I can't tell if it's any good. And so I just started asking her, does it make you tired? No, Mom. And believe me, I'm telling you what, she could do it all day. And to the point where we were like, can we suppress the creative urge just a little bit, because these happy calling sounds are irritating our neighbors.
Well, I mean, I love this already, you know, the language that you're using. Number one, I love that your daughter was doing it, you say, naturally.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of misconception about belt. And you also gave us just a friendly little definition, a relaxed definition that you were just saying. What were you saying? A call. Call.
Happy, joyful calling.
Yeah.
It comes from the really joyful part of you.
I remember when I was in, in the States doing high school, I had that classic all-American experience. I was captain of the cheerleading squad.
Yes, you were. Of course you were.
And I was class president.
No
way. Yeah. But I really credit the strength of my voice from that calling, you know, and I'm not going to do it now. But
come on, you've got to give us a cheer, Becky.
Like, go!
Yes!
It has to come with movement. But it's that blast, isn't it? So tell us, actually, while we've got you here, tell us what you think. I don't want to assume that I think everyone kind of knows what belting is, but let's not assume. And it's also really good to kind of really backtrack. What would you say belting is?
Gosh. That's a loaded question, isn't it?
So many angles.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like this needs to be a collaboration, because I think sometimes when people are talking about belting, they're talking about the sound, the resulting sound. And sometimes when they talk about belting, they're talking about what you do to make the sound. And so a lot of conflict or controversy come from these ideas that when we talk about it, we're actually not talking about the same thing. And so if you're talking about a sound that sounds loud and joyful and makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck in a really good way, which is often what we're talking that we use typically in classical or in commercial contemporary music, CCM music, right? Mm-hmm. But yes, then we're talking about one thing. But if you're talking about how you make the sound, we're talking about something very different, and we hear it all over the place. We hear it in, you know, music that comes not from a Western background. We hear it there. We hear it in classical music when Pavarotti is singing. So it's really important, I think, to figure out, first of all, the sound that you're talking about, and whether you're talking about that sound or whether you're talking about how we make the sound. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think what I'm also hearing you say, number one, be careful of terms. Yeah. Number two, it's kind of reminded me of the chat I had with Barbara, because we're all on our own unique journey and we all have our own unique instrument. And so it's going to be different for everyone. Yes. Number two. And number three, when I hear you say joyful, I would say it can also be passionate. It's for me, it's about the emotion and the intent. And I think that's how it probably just came about. You know, how can I show the emotion to this next level? and it's developed from there, maybe, of just this bellowing. I mean, different words, but really for me it always involves a crescendo or an emotion of a release, and that's what affects us so much, isn't it? Whether it's happy or painful. It can be painful too.
Well, and I agree that, and that's why channeling the emotion is so important, because whenever we make emotional sounds, we're practicing, aren't we? And people rarely lose their voices from shouting for a long period of time or crying. Babies never lose their voice. And most parents wish that they would, just a smidge, right? And they can just do that forever. And, you know, when you're finding that true emotion, when you're in practice or you're in warm up, right? The brain works. And when the brain works, the muscles work, right? And so I agree with you that finding whatever that emotional connection is actually what will put those muscles in place in a way that all of the instruction in the world can't do it. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And a lot of people, you know, again, going back to the terms, you know, people say, oh, well, belting, I've heard that's unhealthy, or what do you think about that? I'm sure you've heard a lot of this too.
Yeah, it does make me sad when people still think that, and occasionally you hear it, though thankfully less. And that's why I think you have to set up your fundamental rule, and it has to be the first rule that that belting, first of all, has to feel amazing. The feel of it and the sound of it are two different things. So when people are belting for the first time, oftentimes, if that's not what you're used to, the sound will be quite scary. And it might sound bad. And you may say, this isn't something I associate with singing. This isn't a singing sound. This is what I do to my kids when they're irritating me. Not me ever. I never shout at my children. But
that's the other one, the mom voice.
Yeah, the mom voice. This sounds like the mom voice, or this sounds like the teacher voice. This doesn't sound like my singing voice, but it should feel amazing. And so once you separate those things and set the ground rule of, like, I'll never ask you to do anything that makes you feel tired, but I may ask you to do some things that you don't associate with singing. And if I do ask you to do that, I'll invite you to do that. And you have the option as to say whether I want to do this or not. But I will never, ever, ever ask you to make a sound that feels vocally tiring, or at the end of it, you go, golly, I don't want to do that again. That really tired me out. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
And once you set that ground rule, there's no question about whether belting is healthy or not, because people are doing it and doing it and doing it for years and years and years. There's just too much research to the contrary to even entertain that argument that belting is unhealthy.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that we're always in the driving seat as the singer. We might have a vocal coach. I don't know why I guess that's happening because I've done this, but
and now you have fireworks, Becky.
I know. I just the effect I have. Look how far I've come with the tech now. I mean, gosh. The problem is I don't know what I'm doing, but I think, yeah, we're in the driver's seat. So I love what you're saying now. I'll never ask you to make an uncomfortable sound, you know, and it can be natural. But what I heard you say also is that to learn how to belt, because, you know, belting is sort of seen as the holy grail, isn't it? Of, you know, even just the term, but to learn how to belt, if your voice is not naturally, if you're not a kind of naturally loud person, if you don't have kids, you never use that mom voice, that teacher voice, or, you know, if you're just a softly spoken person, it can feel out of your comfort zone.
Yes,
that's why you can use things like exaggerated sounds to kind of coerce. So it can maybe feel uncomfortable in that way, because you're like, oh, this sort of feels like really far away from how I am as my personality.
Yes, so much.
Yeah, but what you're saying is, it's not, when you do a good healthy belt that is natural, unique to you, it's not, you're not going to feel it. What I say is, you don't want to feel it on the throat.
Exactly.
Do you? You don't want to feel anything on your throat as a vocalist.
That's a really good way of putting it. You don't want to feel a strain, I think is what. Yeah. That's really good. You don't want to feel it here.
Yeah. And so as a vocal coach, I mean, there's so many questions I could ask you, but Could you give some singers some tips on how to work towards developing their belt?
Well, I think, first of all, open your eyes and your ears to the sounds around you and the sounds that you make. So for a lot of my singers, helping them find where they might be doing it, or if they've never done it, because a lot of singers, especially in this culture, that loud sound isn't associated with joy like it is in my culture.
Like it is in what culture?
In my culture, loud, happy sounds are everywhere. We can't get away from it, right? You know, we're at the dinner table and somebody's going, "Hey, can you pass me the potatoes?" Like we're belting all the time, right? But
there's no airs and graces in the U.S. family.
Yes, exactly. We're belting over the dinner table for just to get our food, right?
Yeah.
But for some people, that's a scary sound and it's an angry sound, and so they can't channel it themselves. But they can find someone, even if it's someone that they watch on TV, to imitate. They can find someone to impersonate. And when they find that, then all of a sudden they're able to unlock a new area of the voice that feels safe to them because it's not them doing it. Does that make sense? And so you have to be comfortable being bigger than it might feel like is polite in the circumstances. Yeah. And that takes courage and it takes commitment. But if you can't do it yourself, find a friend, channel a friend. And oftentimes I give people permission to channel me, to imitate me. I'm big, I'm loud, I'm, you know, and that can unlock because they're not doing it themselves. They're doing it. And then once you have that, then you find the place that you can inhabit as who you are, that feels safe. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Does that mimicry can be such a powerful tool, and it helps you come out of yourself that little bit. Yeah. You know,
it creates a safer space, I think.
Yeah. So that's would that be your number one? I love that tool because it's like a really quick and easy, you know, find a singer that you love and then mimic and then find your own version of that.
Yes, exactly. I mean, obviously you don't want to, you build your whole craft and artistry around mimicking other people. But if you're listening and trying to figure out what they're doing and how they're doing it, it can create a safe sort of entry for then you to go, oh, okay, well, how would I do this as me, right? And so it takes the pressure off and lowers the stakes a little bit as a first port of entry.
Yeah. I'd love to talk to you a little bit about the evolution of belt because, you know, like way back, I feel like when there might have been a time period when it was literally kind of yelling, like, you know, Ethel Merman and some Judy Garland and, you know, maybe back in those days. And now I feel like it has evolved. And I saw something that you wrote. It was like maybe a course that you had run, and it was like soprano to mix belt. Yes. And you used that term, and I love that because I'm a teacher of mix, and I teach mix belt.
Yes.
Can you give us some insights into what you think about that? Why did you choose that term?
Well, it's so funny because my teaching has evolved quite a bit since that initial study as well, because I think the landscape is evolving. And so I would say what I meant by it then and what I mean by it now are probably slightly different. Mm-hmm. But when we're talking about mixed belt and you're talking about physiologically what makes up head voice and what makes up chest voice, I think we used to think one way sort of 50 years ago. And then sort of 5 years ago, we thought another way where there are thin folds and there are thick folds, right? And thick folds make your chest voice. Thin folds make your head voice. But nobody was asking how. How do you thin? How do you thicken? And is it only one way? Is it only by using the muscles at the point of the vocal folds that we can thin and thicken? And we know that that's not true because we know supra and subglottic pressure can also have an impact on the closed quotient of the singing. And so what singers feel as mixed voice, as in, I'm not in my head voice, I'm not in my chest voice, I think we're doing with pressure. Does that make sense?
Yes. And
I think people, pressure and narrowing, I think people like Carrie Obert are doing a lot of really good research in this area of how does pharyngeal narrowing contribute to the closed quotient of your singing, right? And you think,
and I'm just
gonna, yeah, sorry, go.
When Christie is saying closed quotients, she's describing how, like, the percentage, how much the vocal folds are.
Yes, sorry, I've gone deep technique all of a sudden.
Well, I like that I know that. I don't know
4,000 feet under the sea I've gone.
Yeah, because
but what that means is that singers who are really mixing well think, well, I feel like I'm in my head voice, but what the sound that's coming out of me is a very chesty, belty sound. And I think that's commercially really viable. It's the sound we like to hear. And B, it's healthy as all get out. You can do it all day long, forever, ever, ever. And C, it sounds 98% like belting when you put a microphone in front of it. So we really are relying less and less on the hey kind of sound and more on the yay kind of sound. Does that make sense? Oh, I think you're muted.
Yeah.
What
can you hear me still?
Think about that. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I find when you can blend and get a mix that is just, again, you don't feel the need to have to blast so much, and to have to rely on that really heavy, then it can just feel, your voice can be more zippy.
Yes.
You can go higher. There's not a glass ceiling.
Absolutely.
So I'm the way that I teach more and more is kind of like backwards approach. So looking at vowel shaping and things to do that for you, so that you don't have to rely on it coming from underneath so much of the air. Yeah. And I think what I would describe as a healthy belty sound would always have like a bit of ring to it. So even I mean, it can be on the knife edge. It can be, I've heard some mixed belts that are, you can't really tell the difference at all, but it still has, for me, the difference is, it has this element of freedom, you know?
Yep.
When I listen to Aretha Franklin, belt it out, I hear this freedom in the sound. And if the freedom is lacking and the person is yelling, then it can, for me, it's almost like the listener, like at the gig, starts taking more drinks. It's like the subconscious thought is, oh, that's the last note that person can reach, rather than I feel relaxed because their voice is so free, but it's powerful, and it's full. So I just love it. And I love helping singers get there. And it's great also, isn't it, to have some nuanced information about it, and just to be able to help people get in there. But I love the things that you said about making sure it's unique to that person, healthy to them, because it's important that we're not there going, do this, do that, but also just working with the singer. Can I just ask, while I've got everyone here, if anybody has any questions for Christie? The other thing I just meant to say is that obviously Christie is not just a belting coach. She is, like you say, you do legit, you do it all, don't you, Christie?
I do anything anybody wants to pay me to do, I will find a way to do it, like we all do.
And how important it is to your clients. You said that you do you sort of run, like, say, belting workshops? Like you said, you did one belting workshop on one day, and then you did a legit.
Yeah, I don't do group workshops as much, simply because it requires a lot of time to organize it and all of that. But I do a lot of audition preparation. So I'm timetabled on 2 drama schools, but also in my private studio, it's almost always I have to make a voice reel, or I have to do an audition, or I've gotten a callback. The callback's tomorrow. I need to belt this note. Can you help me?
At last minute.
Yeah.
And I that's so great. I bet you can help them. That's really cool. So it's kind of getting in, helping people for what it matters, so leading up to something.
Yeah.
So I've got a question here. Do you have to really build up to belting, or can you belt on and off, so to speak? I think Steffi means, can you just come out with it, or do you have to build your voice up to it? Is that what you mean, Steffi? Just let us know if there's more.
Is it like during the course of one song or in the course of your technical development?
Yeah, exactly. Let's answer both questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think belting, you know, when you're talking about that happy, joyful call, I always say I could teach you, I'll take 10 minutes of your time, but I'll probably only need 5 to help you do that. And when people find that, it's a really exciting feeling. And when you plot that into a song during the course of a song, I think what you find is that most of what we're doing is in a course of any given song, most of what we're doing is probably what you and I teach is mixing, right? And you might use that happy, joyful shout for, as Tom Burke says, for the verbs and the shiny objects, right? So anything that needs that extra pa pa, the money note, maybe you would use that happy, joyful call. You set it up when you're practicing it, and then you add that in as a transition into the final element. In terms of your technique, I think as what I do with my students that I have more time with is I do a range of contemporary mixing and belting techniques, and each of them strengthen different parts of the voice or give you different facilities. So like, as you said, you explained mix so perfectly because it gives you superhero powers in terms of your freedom. So ability to get soft, loud, adding more or less vibrato, going higher or lower. You can mix as really as high as you want to, and you get what I call the Mean Girls mix or the Heathers mix, right? That really sounds like belting, but really feels like an anchored head voice.
And then you can be flexible to come out of it. And
so I think that's the very first thing that you have to learn if you want to learn CCM music is that. And then you add the happy shouting, then you add some other things, some other little special sauce things. I don't know, does that make sense?
It does make sense. Let's have another question. For a sustained section of belt in a song, like in Defying Gravity, do you find stamina needs to be built up over time, or do you recommend using the mixed belt for the majority and then just the odd true belt note?
Well, that's interesting, Becky. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I think it depends. As you said at the beginning, it depends on where you come from. So if like me, for example, I trained and performed professionally as an opera singer. So my larynx has always been right down, right by my clavicle. It is so low. Right. And I breathe and it drops. And so for me, I've got to plaster it up behind my eyes and keep it up there and keep it up there and keep it up there if I want to sing a song like Defying Gravity. Now that takes me time to develop. And if I were to teach that or to perform it, I would put myself through a 3 or 4 week training program just to tone those muscles. And that is muscular development, right? That's very, very different from vocal fatigue, but that is strengthening that part of the voice. For someone else, I've had students who, when they go to speak or sing, their larynx lifts. And for those students, they probably wouldn't need as much training or stamina because the larynx is naturally sitting in a higher position. And so I think this also takes us back to one of the difficulties with belt is sometimes you have vocal coaches teaching from their preferred state, but they're teaching singers that don't have the preferred state. And they say things like the larynx shouldn't move, but you're like, but mine has to. If mine doesn't, I'm screwed, right?
Right.
And so giving singers permission to have their own unique journey, as you said, is really, really important. My series just turned on. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I think you're answering now that it has to be unique for everyone's coming from a different background, a different position, and has different needs. So I think you're right. I think for something like that, because it's going to be, nuanced training. So I think the idea is practice getting into the shape that you need to, the sound, the feel, the position. So I feel like that's an advanced example. And I often liken this type of thing to, like, let's say you're an advanced athlete you know, working with your coach and you're trying to shave a few seconds off of your run, you're going to have the tiniest adjustments required, but it's going to take like a lot of nuanced detail getting in there.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I would say it's different for everyone, but yeah, as long as it's got that big open ring and it feels good, then we're all winning.
I think shape is actually really profound too. When you talk about shape,
that shape is a game changer for me too, because it's like you don't have to do much, but when you get it right, it's like, wow, like this whole world has just opened up for me.
Yeah.
Helen says, Christie, your mixed belt coaching was a game changer, so useful. I'm pretty fearless with it now. Thank you.
Helen, I remember you. You were always fearless. That's how you've done so well. Brilliant. I'm so glad to hear that.
Fearless, don't you? You do have to be fearless to sing in that way.
Yes.
I have a lot to say about that too. But for me, it's almost like a opening myself up kind of thing to help me get into that big open belt. And because I kind of stifle myself, oh, I can't possibly make that sound, or no, I'm too self-conscious. But when you feel it and you can, I mean, that's such a big part of it, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. And that's why I think it has such an emotional response, because it requires a huge amount of courage. And as the vocal coach, you have to sometimes urge people to have courage, and you just have to sit honestly with them and say, if you don't have the courage, there's no point. There's no point, because these sounds are scary. They're not physically scary. Physically, they should feel amazingly, but emotionally and aesthetically, they can be really scary. And you have to kind of be this is where being a mom comes in handy. So I have to say, come on, this is what it requires. But then once you get there, if you understand that that's it, then you just unlock this incredible emotional sound, and you just have people crying, and you're crying, and you're like, what's just happened here?
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad we've touched on this at the end here, because for me, there is something about the opening yourself and to give what you're intending to express. You're giving it, you're allowing the audience to witness what you are expressing, and that is the power of singing right there. That is why we do it. It's beautiful. I think this has been a great chat, and I really appreciate you giving your time for us, Christie, and it's so nice to be here on the Sing Space Vocal Gym again.
Agreed, Becky. Thank you so much for inviting me. I love these kinds of collaborations.
Me
and
too.
We need to do more. And good luck with the vocal gym, guys. You are in fantastic hands. And I can't wait to see. I'm on the group, and I'm going to be participating and feeding in.
Yay.
And I just can't wait to see what you do, Becky.
Please do. And I'll say to everyone, it's going to be a lot of doing, so that today, like chats like this and with Barbara, is so great because we can kind of talk about the nuances. But with the challenge, we're going to be getting in and doing. So I'm not going to be explaining a lot, but it's about getting this 10 days of repetition. And I really look forward to it. Tomorrow, we have got a special guest coming on with me. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but it's quite exciting. And yeah, I will see everyone back here at 10:30 tomorrow, or if you're watching on catch up, that's also great. Yeah, and thanks again. Huge thanks to Christie. I can't wait to watch this back myself and get your insights. Yeah, getting lots of thanks.
My pleasure. It's so great to see everybody on here.
Your your mixed belt training is that on the Sing Space Vocal Gym?
I think it is, actually. If not the mixed belt, then the belting one, I'm pretty sure is still on there.
Oh, okay.
The big, and there's all my mixed belt stuff is hidden in there. So it's yeah.
It's within, even if it's the terms, like often the name might be different, but yeah.
I've got a couple sessions that are devoted to mixed belting within the 8-session module. So if you go to the belting class, you'll find everything.
Okay. Fantastic. Thanks
Wonderful.
again.
Wonderful to see you, Becky. Take care.